I used to think bravery was about not being afraid. Soldiers, firefighters, people who jumped into danger without flinching. But now I realize real courage is knowing the pain that's coming and still choosing to walk through it. That's what Jesus did. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all over the world. The story we often hear starts with the cross, but it really begins the night before, in a quiet garden called Gethsemane. Jesus was there with his closest friends, the same men he taught, healed with, laughed with, and prayed with. But in this moment, they were asleep, and he was alone. He knew what was coming. He knew he'd be betrayed, not by a stranger, but by someone he had broken bread with. He knew he'd be abandoned, not by enemies, but by the same friends who promised they'd die for him. He knew he'd be beaten, spit on, mocked, stripped of dignity, nailed to a cross like a criminal. But what hit me the most? He felt the weight of it all. The Bible says he was in such agony that his sweat became like drops of blood. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's a medical condition called hematidrosis. It happens under extreme stress. And yet, even knowing all that, Jesus whispered a prayer that changed everything. Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me, but not my will. Yours be done. He didn't want to suffer. He wasn't numb to it. He wasn't pretending. He was fully human and terrified. But he loved us more than he feared the pain. So he stood up, woke his disciples, and faced what he knew was coming. The next hours were hellish. Judas showed up with soldiers and betrayed him with a kiss. The rest of the disciples scattered. Peter, who once said he'd die for Jesus, denied even knowing him 3 times. They beat him so badly he was unrecognizable. They placed a crown of thorns on his head, mocking his kingship. They forced him to carry his own cross until he physically collapsed. Then they nailed him to it, hands and feet, and lifted him up in front of a crowd that jeered and laughed. And still, he stayed. Not because the nails held him, but because love did. At any moment, he could have called on angels to rescue him. He could have ended the pain, proved himself, wiped out everyone mocking him. But instead, he prayed, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Even in his final breaths, he wasn't focused on himself. He looked at a criminal beside him and promised him paradise. He looked at his mother and made sure she would be cared for. And when it was finished, he gave up his spirit. The part that always humbles me most is this. Jesus didn't die because he had to. He died because he chose to. He knew what was coming. He knew the rejection, the pain, the betrayal, the weight of every sin, mine and yours, laid on his shoulders. And he still said yes. Jesus didn't stumble into suffering. He walked into it, eyes open, heart breaking, but love unwavering. When we feel unworthy, when shame whispers, "You've gone too far," remember this. He saw your worst and still went to the cross. That's not weakness. That's not obligation. That's love, stronger than fear, deeper than pain, and more personal than we'll ever deserve. And he'd do it all over again, just for you. What part of this video stood out to you the most? Comment down below. If this encouraged you, share it with someone who needs to hear how God's promises are still true today. And if you want to hear more stories that connect the Bible to your everyday life, follow for more.